My name is Jeff Morgan. I am from Dallas, Texas. I'd like to just speak about this Senate Bill 107 out of California. This was sponsored by Scott Wiener, I think his name is, representing Senate District 11. This took place in California and it went into effect on New Year's Day, January the 1st, 2023. Now, this is the news brief from his office, which says that Senator Wiener's historic bill to provide refuge for trans kids and their families is signed into law. There is a link right here. This is coming from September the 30th, Sacramento, California, where it says that Governor Gavin Newsom signed into law Senator Scott Wiener, who is a Democrat out of San Francisco, his legislation to provide refuge for trans kids and their families, Senate Bill 107. It will take effect on January the 1st, 2003. Senate Bill 107 will protect trans kids and their families if they flee to California from Alabama, Texas, Idaho, or any other state criminalizing parents of trans kids for allowing them to receive gender-affirming care. Now let's first discuss this thing. What is gender-affirming care? Gender-affirming care is basically something that helps a child persist in his or her mental and psychological delusion. When you look at biology, biology is in the DNA. It is something that is a fact. If you look at your DNA and you're XX, you are a girl. If you're XY, you are a boy. That's it. At the DNA level, you are either a boy or a girl. What happens if you're a boy and you say, you know what, I think I'm a girl? That is not gender affirming care. That is a mental delusion. If you're a boy, you're a boy. If you're a girl, you're a girl. What happens if there's a girl who says, you know what, I'm a girl, but I want to be a boy. So I want to identify as a boy. That is not gender affirming care. So any type of care that helps that child persist in that mental delusion or psychological delusion or whatever type of delusion it is, this is what California is calling gender affirming care. Now, it gets really more criminal than this, as what it really comes down to is that they're trying to protect children, underage minor people who want to transition, who want to undergo surgeries or puberty blockers, some type of chemicals or drugs that will change them, in their mind anyway, from a boy to a girl. That is impossible to do. It will emasculate a boy and it will also ruin a girl. If you cut off a girl's breasts, the girl is still a girl, just a mutilated girl. If you cut off a boy's penis, the boy is still a boy, he's just a mutilated boy. And these things, when you're talking about actually doing something that will be cutting off healthy sexual organs, and when you are talking about cutting off a person's healthy sexual organs, that is abuse. That is not gender affirmation. That is abuse. The use of the term gender affirming care, that is a misnomer. It's designed to mislead you into what's really going on. So they're saying if this is going to be a bill that will allow parents who want to so-called transition their children, or children who want to transition from one sex to another, even though that's impossible to do, the state of California will give them refuge. Part of the reason for this bill was because of what happened in Texas last year, and I'll go into that in just a moment. Anyway, the bill, it continues, the news clip continues, if these parents and their kids come to California, the legislation will help protect them from having their kids taken away from them or from being criminally prosecuted for supporting their trans kids' access to health care. Gender mutilation is not health care. It is not health care. Gender mutilation is not healthcare. We have to understand that. And I found it very interesting here because we have these people that are saying, well, we need to protect these parents from having their kids taken away from them or being criminally prosecuted. Well, why don't they fight against CPS? CPS has taken kids away from parents for no reason whatsoever, maybe because the parents are poor and could not provide for them, or for whatever reason, maybe because the kids have been homeschooled, maybe because the kids are playing outside without adult supervision. Things that I, as a child growing up, did on a regular basis from morning until evening. But that might put the child in danger. That could be considered neglectful parenthood, neglectful supervision, and that is a reason to take kids away from them. But now we want to have a special exception. We want to make sure that CPS can still take kids away from regular parents. But if there's a parent who's going to mutilate a child, We want CPS to not have the ability to touch them. And we certainly don't want them to be criminally prosecuted for supporting their children's what they call access to health care treatments that would mutilate a child. That's what this bill is asking for. Now, one of the things you should be concerned about immediately is that SB 107 is co-sponsored by Equality California, which I'm sure is an LGBTQ large group, Trans Family Support Services, and Planned Parenthood. If Planned Parenthood is behind anything, you have got to realize that it's probably a terrible idea. Planned Parenthood believes that babies in a mother's womb should be able to be killed. That's Planned Parenthood. That's the morality of Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood is a co-sponsor of Senate Bill 107. Now here is Senator Wiener speaking for a moment. As so many states work to erase trans kids and criminalize their families, California must always have their backs. Well, first, what I would say is that is not California's jobs. And once again, this sentence is full of inaccuracies. As so many states work to erase trans kids, nobody's talking about erasing trans kids. Whatever a trans kid is, because first off, nobody knows what a trans kid is. I'd love to see a definition of a trans kid. What is a trans kid? A trans kid is a kid who identifies as the opposite gender and wants to be the opposite gender, something along those lines. It's a psychological issue. It's a mental issue. It is not a physical issue. A trans kid is when a boy, a biological boy, wants to become a girl and is confused about his gender. A trans kid is when a girl whose DNA says that she is a girl, maybe wants to identify as a boy, or maybe wants to pretend that she's a boy or something like that. That is a trans kid. Nobody's talking even about erasing trans kids. They're saying that usually what happens is that as people go through puberty, puberty helps eliminate these confusions. During puberty, what happens? Your sexual organs grow out. And we know it because most of us have gone through puberty. Something happens somewhere between the ages of 12, 13, up to 18, something along those lines, that our body changes. And we realize if we didn't beforehand, we are either a boy becoming a man or we are a girl becoming a woman. So this whole idea about erasing trans kids, that is a lie right off the bat, and to criminalize their families. The idea that they're trying to say is that these poor people, we want to criminalize people because they may have trans kids. What we are saying is not that whatsoever. It's just saying that if you are a parent or somebody or a social agency or a doctor or a psychologist or whatever it may be, and you want to take steps that can cause damage to a child, emotional damage, mental damage, physical damage, that can possibly cause them the ability to never be able to reproduce. And the child who cannot contract for anything, a child who's underage, a child who is ineligible to buy cigarettes on his own, a child who is ineligible to get a tattoo on his own, a child who is ineligible to even get medicine on his or her own sake. They're trying to say that, well, it's okay for children like these to make the decision to change from a girl into a boy, which is impossible, or a boy into a girl. And as many people have said that, children in their younger age, they often dream that they're somebody who they aren't. You may dream that you're Superman. You may think that you're Barbie or whatever. Whatever it may be, you have this idea that somehow you identify with a cartoon character. I remember when I was young, I thought that I wanted to be able to fly, like some of the superheroes could fly. I never could fly. And had I identified on flying, and had I tried to fly because of my identity, I would have hit the ground, and I would have broken a leg, I would have broken an arm, I would have broken my back, I would have broken my head, I may have killed myself. That's how delusions cause people to have damages. Anyway, so SB 107, with SB 107 signed into law, California is forcefully pushing back against the anti-LGBT hatred spreading across parts of our nation. And once again, you can tell, and I'm pretty sure that Scott Wiener is probably a homosexual. I'm not positive, but I think he probably is. I heard him speak when I was testifying on this bill, and he sounded like he was a gay person, if you want to call it gay or homosexual. He had same-sex attraction that he was acting on. That's what it sounded like. Something was wrong with him from a normal moral perspective. Most men have desires toward women. Most women have desires toward men. We have tried to make it sound so that if men want to have sex with men, that's normal and that's okay. If women want to have sex with women, that's normal and that's okay. But anyway, Scott Wiener, I believe, and I'm not 100% positive, but I'm pretty sure that he's a homosexual. And he's going to be advancing the LGBTQ rights. Now, remember that there are people that are lesbians and gay, if you want to call them gay, that they're saying do not do this to kids. But here's Scott Wiener. He's going to be a big hero. He's going to come in like the white knight that he wants to be. And with SB 107 signed into law, California is forcefully pushing back against the anti-LGBTQ hatred spreading across parts of our nation. Who talked about hatred? We're talking about protecting children, protecting underage children. We are talking about protection. He is talking about mutilation. So please tell me, who is the person who's hating these kids? The people that are seeking to protect the kids or the people that are seeking to have the kids mutilated? And by the way, when it comes down to the mutilation of children, who profits from this? The pharmaceuticals. Big Pharma will profit big time. And I'm sure that Big Pharma is probably giving Senator Wiener a lot of money to help with this because, Big Pharma, they're going to have these drugs that are coming out. And Senator Wiener, we're going to be, backing you in your LGBTQ, but we know we're going to have a payback coming in. Because if you put a person on Lupron or a similar drug, you get a payout of well over $1 million over the lifetime of a person. You have doctors who are performing these surgeries. That's like cosmetic doctors. We have this big, rise in cosmetic doctors because a lot of times it was women, sometimes it's men. They decide they want to change their looks. They want to be more attractive to the opposite sex. They want to feel good about themselves, and they will spend thousands and thousands of dollars doing that until maybe the surgeries go wrong and they look like something grotesque and monstrous. But the same thing is happening with this LGBTQ stuff. This is a big money maker for the medical industry. Medicine should have a healing property to it, some healing quality to it, not something that is destructive. So this whole idea, once again, about California forcefully pushing back against the anti-LGBTQ hatred, that is nonsense. We are seeking to protect children and people under the age of consent. And the other side, the Scott Wiener in particular, is trying to mutilate them. He wants to have the right to mutilate them. So, according to Scott Wiener, this legislation has inspired 19 other states to introduce similar, quote, trans refuge state bills, as trans kids and their parents are currently under assault by executive and legislative action in Texas, Idaho, Louisiana, Arizona, and other states. Once again, when you look at all the nonsense that he's spewing out of his mouth, this is another thing that he's doing that it doesn't make any sense whatsoever for him to say this stuff. He talks about the far right anti-LGBTQ governor Greg Abbott. In Texas, I do not know of people that look at Greg Abbott as being a far right governor, an anti-LGBTQ governor. I don't see anybody doing that. This is a mischaracterization, and if you can mischaracterize someone, you can slander them. That's exactly what Scott Wiener is doing right now. But he did say that Texas began investigating and potentially prosecuting parents of trans kids who receive gender-affirming care. And really, if we want to be accurate about this statement, it was talking about investigating parents of whatever trans kids are who are mutilating their kids, who are taking steps to make sure that their kids will be able to have drugs that will change them, that can hurt them, that can cause long-term damage, mental, psychological, emotional, physical damages, and that can can take away their reproductive rights from them. This is medical abuse. It is complete medical abuse. And this is what Scott Wiener is advocating for. He wants to have medical abuse to become the norm in the state of California. Governor Abbott also directed state agencies to consider moving trans kids from their parents and placing them in foster care. Once again, this is a falsehood. All he was doing with this, to the best of my knowledge, was stating that if there are trans kids and the parents are trying to actively put these mutilating procedures on the kids, that is tantamount to child abuse. If you have whatever a trans kid is in your home, nobody's saying you have to take the trans kid away from the parents. Just saying that if you are going to help a child who is underage, who cannot make a decision for himself legally by law, and you are giving him access to these types of drugs that would permanently change him, or perhaps even just transitorily change him, or surgeries that would do the same thing, that would be considered child abuse. When you think about it, what's so wrong with this? If you have children who want to drink alcohol and they're underage, do we prosecute people who provide them with alcohol? Yes, we do. Because you cannot buy alcohol until you are, I believe it's 18 years old in the state of Texas. Maybe it's 21, I don't know. And if you want to smoke, the same thing. Well, I really want to smoke. I'm just a 14-year-old kid and I want to smoke. And how am I going to get some cigarettes? Somebody's going to buy them for me. Well, guess what? The person who bought them for you is considered a person who's doing some type of abuse against the kids. But now when it comes down to the sexual ideology, this gender ideology, somehow we're supposed to say, oh, you know what? Even though parents and adults and older people are supposed to protect kids, now we're allowed to mutilate them. Now we're allowed to abuse them. Scott Wiener and the Democratic Party, the state of California, is asking for protections to commit child abuse against kids. While Governor Abbott's directive was temporarily placed on hold by a state court, the state is appealing that ruling. Similarly, Alabama enacted a law to put parents and physicians in prison for up to 10 years for allowing or providing for gender-affirming care to trans kids. I am not familiar with the Alabama law that states this. If this law is accurate, because so far a lot of what Scott Wiener is saying is inaccurate, but if the statement is accurate, then in all likelihood it's probably the exact same thing like Texas, that if a parent is committing mutilation of a child, abuse of a child, that would be under child abuse, and that person would go into prison. And when you think about it, once again, this is just normal. If somebody's convicted of child abuse, generally speaking, the adult goes into prison. This is child abuse. And what's going on here, they're trying to paint lipstick on a pig. The pig is gender mutilation and child abuse, and they're calling it a gender-affirming care to trans kids. It's absolute nonsense. Scott Wiener probably knows this, but Scott Wiener is an ideologue, so he's going to support this. Given recent trends in anti-LGBTQ and anti-abortion legislation, notice how these two are linked together. Anti-LGBTQ and anti-abortion legislation. So anti-abortion legislation means that a mother cannot kill a child who is living and growing inside of her body. That's all it means. You're saying that the mother is supposed to protect a child who was dependent upon her to be delivered into the world and to have a normal life. Now, could you imagine if you had a legislation that says, you know what, fathers in their homes, because the fathers are the protectors of their home and stuff like that, and they're going to say, listen, I've got too many kids, I'm not making enough money, I can kill a kid at any point in time, maybe when they're 9 years old or whatever, I can just get rid of them, maybe I don't like the way that the kid's turning out or something like that, I can kill them. We would consider that to be murder. Abortion is murder. That's all you have to come down to. Abortion is murder. There is a living baby, and a living baby is being murdered. They try to make it sound like we need to protect women. If you want to protect women, give them additional money so that they can care for their children. Give them marriage. Do something to help them. Because 73% of the women who have abortions regret it. Regret doing that. And of the people that transition, that so-called go through the transition stuff, a lot of those also regret the transition. So again, this is abuse that's going on, abortion abuse, LGBTQ abuse. This is what Scott Wiener and the Democratic Party in California stands for. SB 107 has three main components. The first one being it prohibits the enforcement of a law of another state that authorizes a state agency to remove a child from their parent or guardian based on the parent or guardian allowing the child to receive gender-affirming care. Once again, gender-affirming care is mutilation. Gender mutilation. That's what that means. There's no such thing as gender-affirming care. That is a choice of words that, again, is designed to make something that's barbaric appear acceptable to the general public. This bill would prevent California's law enforcement from cooperating with any individual or out-of-state agency regarding the provision of this lawful gender mutilation, call it what it is, gender mutilation, child abuse, performed in the state. As a result, families will be able to come to California to avoid having their trans children, and once again, please, what is a trans child? Nobody even knows what this is, taken away from them. So basically what California is doing is allowing child abuse to take place. Gender mutilation, child mutilation. If this were to be happening in a camp like Nazi Germany, we would be against it. But it's happening in America, and we're calling it gender-affirming health care. It is mutilation. That is the biggest problem. Number two, it bars compliance in California with any out-of-state subpoena seeking health or other related information about the people who come to California to receive gender-affirming care. Once again, gender-affirming care is child mutilation. Gender-affirming care is nonsense. It is mutilation. And unfortunately, in Texas right now, we have a Supreme Court, except for one person, who has now agreed that this is going to be okay, that we can send our kids to another state against one parent's will and let them be mutilated. Gender-affirming care is nonsense. If the subpoena relates to efforts to criminalize individuals or remove children from their homes for having gender-affirming care, again, gender-affirming care is not gender-affirming care. Gender-affirming care is gender mutilation. Some states are considering legislation that would extend their criminal prohibitions even to residents who travel out of state to receive gender-affirming care. Now, notice what they're saying here right now. Again, the gender-affirming care is nonsense. But if a resident travels out of state, in other words, a court could allow this, could allow a mother or a father to travel to another state for that child to receive gender mutilation, some type of a gender mutilation procedure upon him or upon her. And what happens in many instances, in a number of instances anyway, there is one parent who wants it. Typically it's the mom, not always, but typically it's the mom who decides that maybe the boy is a girl or the girl is a boy, and the father cannot do anything about it. So if the mother wants to move to California, the state will give them refuge, and it would help to protect the person who does that. So with here going to California, the mother could actually do this with no regard to the father, and California would protect the mother. It prohibits law enforcement participation in the arrest or extradition of an individual that criminalizes allowing a person to receive or provide gender-affirming health care without conduct is lawful in California and to the fullest extent permitted by federal law. So what we really need to do is gender-affirming health care. What does gender-affirming health care mean? And that's, again, where we come down and we say that gender-affirming health care is nothing other than gender mutilation. It's child abuse, and California is permitting child abuse. California is permitting gender mutilation. California is permitting child castration. California is permitting the use of puberty blockers so that children do not go into puberty and have their confusion resolved, as typically happens. This is a big money-making scheme. I don't know who's paid off Governor Newsom and the other people out there. I do know that this is an ideological war that's going on here. It's not based in science. It's based in ideology. It will declare that it is California public policy that any out-of-state criminal arrest warrant for someone based on violating another state's law against receiving gender-affirming care is the lowest priority for law enforcement in California. Trans youth have already faced numerous barriers to receive the health care that they need. And once again, this is not health care. This is the whole thing. It's like to say that abortion is health care. Abortion is killing a child. It is not health care. And gender mutilation surgeries are not health care. Studies have shown that access to gender-affirming care for trans kids reduces the risk for depression, psychological distress, and suicidal ideation. And I would like to know where all of these studies are, because I know that there was one study done in Sweden, the Swedish study, that says that anybody who's gone through with this had a 19 times higher, more likely rate of suicide or suicidal ideation than those who did not. So, I'd love to see where all of these studies are coming from, and I'd like to have the medical professionals take a look at this. This is just nonsense. This is the way that the left works sometimes. They claim that there are studies to back them up. There are no studies, and if they are, they're tenuous at best. And a normal person would say this is absolutely morally insane and barbaric. The criminalization of trans children and their parents leads to increased mental health issues and even suicide. Once again, this is a complete fabrication and a lie. The criminalization of trans kids and their parents, again, what is trans kids? Nobody knows. And their parents, that's not an issue so long as they are not actually taking steps to mutilate their child. Let me look at it in a different way. Is it wrong to fantasize about rape? Yes, it is. But is it criminal? No, it is not. The criminal part is when a man rapes a woman or a woman rapes a man. They can fantasize about it all they want to. It's wrong. It's morally wrong. But it isn't until their fantasies become action that it becomes something criminal. And if you have a trans child, supposedly whatever that is, and their parents, and they're dealing with this, that's one thing in itself. But when a parent takes actions that abuse a so-called trans child, whatever that is the child abuse part. A parent has the duty to instruct the child morally, religiously, help them with their health issues, emotionally. In essence, what California is also doing too, it's undermining any type of parental rights. They're saying that if one person wants to do this, the California governor will allow it to take place when it comes to the issue of, say, custody because of divorce or something along those lines. With SB 107, California will continue to be a leader in protecting civil rights and the basic dignity of LGBTQ people. This, again, is a blatant lie. They're exploiting LGBTQ people, whatever that is, and they are not helping trans kids and their parents having a safe place to go if they feel threatened with prosecution, criminalization for being who they are. No, that is not what it's about. And seeking the care that they need. The care that they need is a psychological care. It's a mental care. It's not cutting off healthy sexual parts. The whole thing is based on a lie. Scott Wiener, he should be ashamed of himself, but once again, he's an ideologue. I believe he's also a practicing homosexual. I may be wrong on that, but that's what I believe he is. So here he is down here stating that he's going to be, this historic bill is going to provide refuge for trans kids and their families, has been signed into law. This is an abuse bill. And unfortunately, our Texas Supreme Court is allowing California to abuse our kids. They are letting California have jurisdiction over Texas kids and letting California actually decide what the state of a Texas kid will be. In essence, then, Texas has now capitulated. California has won. Texas has lost. Our Supreme Court, with the exception of one person, Justice John Devine, who has the spine of steel. He's the guy who will stand up against all of this stuff. He was the sole dissent. The rest of the Supreme Court, they went along with it, and they said, California, you want to abuse our kids? We're going to let you do this. This was an opinion that was authored by Jimmy Blacklock, and also Evan Young concurred. And to the best of my understanding, the rest of the justices, minus John Devine, concurred with it. I still have to see the final decision on that, but this was a disaster. Texas should be ashamed. Jimmy Blacklock should be ashamed. Evan Young should be ashamed. The fact that we even have to have this debate is something that is horrible in itself. Anyway, that's it for right now. Thank you.